Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to go ahead and go over the Edmodo for Anticipation Guide 6. I have a cold and I've had it for a few days, and so my voice is a little scratchy. I don't have the headset, so the quality of the voice might not be so great either. Besides that, you'll see me drinking a soda a little bit just because my mouth is getting dry, and I might be wiping my nose once in a while also because of my cold. I might even sneeze. Maybe I'll edit out the sneeze. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, anticipation guide. Okay, interesting chapter. A lot of linguistics, which was hard. Now, you'll notice that on the questions that I always asked for differences, plural. I didn't say one difference, a difference. I said differences. What are differences? Which I was expecting two differences for each one. Some of you gave me a definition and then one difference. Usually I took off one point if that was the case. I was looking for two differences. I didn't need but if you gave me a very detailed difference, maybe I would count that. It depended, but generally I was expecting two differences. Now, excuse me, Marissa asks, what other differences are found between English pragmatics and Spanish pragmatics? Well, there are several. Someone mentioned proxemics, how close you are to others when you talk. There's the informal and formal, the difference between ser and eres. No, is that right? No, that's not right. Ser and estar. Okay. Um, no, that's not difference. That's grammar. I'm sorry. That's not at all. Okay, I was thinking of tú y usted. Okay. When to use tú with someone and when to use eres with someone. That's pragmatics big time. It's important for a teacher to know how to, if they are speaking to the students or to the parents, which one to use. And in English, no, they're exactly the same. There are other things, for instance, how to be polite on the telephone, how to greet someone. It's usually language, not motions and so forth, but usually to deal with language, not cultural, not things like shaking hands or kisses or things like that. Isn't so much pragmatics as there are linguistics cues. Again, there are others if you would do research on them. Okay. And what other ways a teacher assesses the student's primary language proficiency? Well, they have it in the book. A little idea, but it's really hard to find. Now, generally you expect that they have decent language proficiency in the first language if they first come from another country. What's more important is what kind of education did they have? Were they at a private school? Were they at an elite school? Were they homeschooled? What kind of literature did they read in that language? How advanced were they in things like social studies, mathematics, everything? All that contributes. Those who are good students in their native language will be generally good students in English. And those who are poor students in their native language will generally be poor students in English as well. And so those are things that you can look for. Francisco, is U.S. nonverbal cues an issue in recent Spanish learners? Probably. Those you mean from Mexico or the U.S. nonverbal cues? Yeah, they might have a little bit of trouble, but Spanish and English are so similar. They are so similar. There really is very little difference. It'll be much different for Asian, much different for someone from India, perhaps. Um, um, there are maybe Russians would be very different as well. African. Um, you just have to look them up and find out. Say, what are other differences between English morphology and Spanish morphology? Morphology is the prefixes and suffixes, how words are put together. Someone wrote about the inflections, all the different inflections, the different for the different tenses and the inflections and all those little suffixes you put on there. They don't have very many prefixes, and they call morphology. They call them affixes, prefixes, and suffixes, and you have different kinds of those. But generally, um, you will have okay, and so um, yeah, and you'll have other ones too. And someone mentioned that we use suffixes more in English, and they don't have suffixes. They will just have two words. Would be in Spanish. So those are some of them, and there are others as well. I'm sure you might have written a different one. Okay, Annalie, can I acquire CALP skills? I'm not quite understand pragmatics. Okay, I think I explained that a little bit. It's the social use of language, the social rules of language. Like when you pick up the phone, what are you supposed to say? When you put the phone down, just before when you end the conversation, what are you supposed to say? I know in the movies, on TV shows, they don't follow the rules because it's TV. But generally, to be polite, there's a way that you something you say at the beginning, like hello, and you might say goodbye at the end. Of course, on the movies and TV, they never do that, but you're supposed to do that. That's how we do it. Um, and so pragmatics is difficult. I had a hard time with pragmatics. That was one of my tougher courses as well. So pay special attention to that as well, because your students might know the language perfectly, but they might not know when to use it correctly in certain circumstances. Yeah, what grade level can students acquire CALP skills in English? They can start learning them in first grade, kindergarten. They should be, as soon as you are taking things out of context a little bit, decontextualizing, we call it. That could be developing CALPs. It's not just conversation and one thing leads to the other thing. And if you're actually studying something, you are, when you talk about the different parts of a book, the beginning, the middle, the end, the setting, those kinds of things, that's academic language. You wouldn't talk about those things in ordinary conversation. And so from a very early age, they can be learning these things from kindergarten. And so when they learn how to do school talk, as I would say, then they are learning the CALP. Some kids never learn school talk. They have a hard time with it for one reason or another. Okay, Lino, does having an advancement in reading in the native language actually help the transition to English reading? Yes, certainly, because they have learned to take symbols and make them into meaning, to have them come together. A fast reader in a different language will become a fast reader in English once they learn the language. The skills of summary, of finding the main idea, those types of things will transfer over. And if they've done that in their native language, they will be able to do that quickly. As soon as they learn the English words, they will be great readers in English. We have a lot of English majors who were very good, who did all their schooling in Mexico or another Latin American or some Latin America or another Latin American country or Spain, and they actually teach at the university English, and their native language is Spanish. And so they were really good in Spanish. They can become very good in English if they want to. Once I become a teacher, should I purchase books translated into the student's native language or just providing? I would say just the English text, probably, because that's what they need to be exposed to more than anything. They can have the native language, because the native language, they should have had that. They should be coming to you in that, or they should be reading something in their native language at home. They might be reading the books you have in school, and at home they might be reading Harry Potter or some other book in their native language as sort of just something they do at home. So that might not be your experience here in Laredo, seeing that too much, but you will see that in other areas. It does have, okay, so Let's go next. Miriam, what are the differences between phonemics in English and Spanish, or can you provide adequate examples of them? Well, the phonemics, that's the sound system. And so the sound system is the sounds in the two languages. And some of you talked about the different vowels. Okay, that there are more vowels in English than there are in Spanish, meaningful vowels, because phonemics is all about the sounds that make meaning. And so you don't have that so much. So the vowels are important. They make the difference in the meaning of words. Also, you have a different R sound in Spanish than you do in English. And you actually have two R sounds. You have the R and the ede, the flap and the trill. The R is the trill, and the ede is the flap, is what they would call it. And those are distinct. You have in English, you have the beginning. They have what we call the labials, the P, the T, the K. Starting a word will generally be aspirated. There'll be a puff of air. And so when we say Pedro an English speaker says Pedro, the P will be aspirated. And in English, we don't know. We have aspirated, unaspirated. It doesn't make any difference. In Spanish, they don't have aspirations. So it'll be more like Pedro. And some people might hear, an English speaker might hear a B instead of a P because there's not the puff of air. And so if you put your fingers up in front of your mouth and you go Pedro, as an English speaker, you see a puff of air. But if you can do Pedro without the puff of air, then you're doing it with a Spanish accent. And so that's part of the difference in phonemics between English and Spanish. And there are many more as well. I wish I had time to teach that. I wish I could teach you linguistics, actually. You can provide examples of the difference between morphology and phonetics. Well, phonology and phonetics. Phonology is just the parts of the words, and the prefixes, suffixes, the root words. That's the morphology, how the individual words are put together, the roots, the prefixes, and the suffixes, and even the lack of suffixes or prefixes, like I mentioned earlier. And then the phonetics is the rules of writing the language. Now, there's something called orthography, which isn't mentioned in here. And orthography is actually the alphabet, or that's the accents and so forth. That belong to the list of consonants, the list of vowels, and the diacritics. When someone said upside down, question mark, and regular question mark at the beginning and the end, that's an orthography thing. That's not a phonetics thing. That's an orthography thing. The phonetics is the rules of how to write what you hear. And we have rules in English of the silent E. That's phonetics. That has nothing to do with phonology. That's phonetics. Because there's sometimes a silent E, and we have silent E that might change the quality of the vowel. But that's the rules of how you spell, basically, is the phonetics. And there are many differences there where it's much more straightforward in Spanish, except they have trouble with the Z and the C. The Z and the S. Oftentimes, people don't know how to spell it. I know how to spell them. I think I'm a better speller than some of you guys in Spanish because I figured that out. I had to learn it a long time ago. And the accents, the sounds of the accents is more of a phonology thing. Phonemics or phonology. Not phonemics. What do we have? Phonemics. I think it was supposed to be phonology that you talked about there. And the rules for when you put the accent mark, that's a phonetics. The rules. I know the rules. So if you put if you don't have the accent on the right word, I can grade you down. I'll say poor grammar in Spanish. Okay, Amy, how can teachers help students transfer the skills and knowledge they have in their native language to English? Um, you have what we call easy reader books, or you try to find their level and you give them literature. You expose them to literature that is probably not too challenging vocabulary wise, and that they can slowly add their vocabulary and they can be using their transferred skills with the easier vocabulary, and then you can increase their vocabulary or the difficulty of the books as they increase their vocabulary, and I think that will help them with the transfer. So the teaching of vocabulary will be very important in order for them to transfer their skills and to give them grade level kinds of tasks as they are described in the TEKS. Okay, when will be the most appropriate time to assign advanced literature readings for CLD students? Well, you look at their language proficiency. And if they have the language proficiency is getting past the intermediate to the higher levels, then advanced literature readings to CLD students. But again, you're going to scaffold so they don't get frustrated. Crystal, given the scenario of Miss Murillo and student Ezekiel, should the teacher continue to correct the child if the teacher knows he or she is not hearing the word she is saying correctly? I think you have to give up at some point. I think that you just have to step back and say, well, that's not going to work, and I can do it all the time. We talk about the seat or the ship and the sheep and things like that, and they're not going to hear it correctly. And I've known professors who can't learn how to pronounce another person's name. It takes them like 2 or 3 years. They hear it over and over again, and they'll be offended if you correct them. In fact, I have offended some of my colleagues by saying, no, it's that. And so I would say let it develop more gradually. And what you'd have, what we call minimal pairs. You might use the minimal pair strategy. And the minimal pair strategy is where you have, like you have ship and sheep, and you minimal pair, and the difference there is the vowel. And so we can have pit and tip. Pit and tip. The minimal pair is the beginning sound, the T and the P. And so, and some of them are going to be more difficult from one language to the other. Like the Asian students oftentimes have a very difficult time between the R and the L. And so with R and L, there's a good chance they're not going to be hearing it, and it might take them several months or maybe even the whole year to be able to repeat after you what you said to them. They're just not, they might be hearing it, but they can't say it. I'm not sure if they're even hearing it. There's a good chance they're not hearing it. That thing about the aspiration, I said Pedro and Pedro, Pedro and Pedro, aspirated, unaspirated. We can't hear that in Spanish or English. But other languages, that is significant, and they're different phonemes. The P aspirated and the P unaspirated are different ones, and they hear them very clearly. But we can't hear the aspiration or non-aspiration. And I had the language I worked with in Peru, they had that situation where they had aspirated and unaspirated, and it took me a long time to actually be able to hear that. Okay. Do teachers motivate children to continue practicing their first language as a way for them to not lose their accent? Not lose their accent? I'm not sure why they would not lose their accent. Now, accents are interesting things. If you've come to the United States and started school, by the time you're 13, generally you're not going to have much of an accent. If you came to the United States at 15 or later, chances are you're going to have an accent speaking English. If you start learning English as in college or even later, you might have a very strong accent. So it has a lot to do with how early. Now, if you bring a child over from Korea, because their parents are graduate students in a university, they won't speak any English when they first come to the United States at 5 years old. But by the time they're teenagers, they'll have absolutely no accent at all. And they'll lose their accent probably after 3 years in the United States, just because the way the brain is formed. Um, accent has a lot more to do with the age of language acquisition than it does with anything else. Now, sometimes your accent as a teacher is so bad that your students can't understand you. Then you have to have some kind of therapy or some kind of intervention to reduce. And they actually have courses at the Language Institute at TAMIU to help people reduce their accents, to modify their accents. A lot of I talked about the graduate students from Korea. Oftentimes they are teaching assistants in the science or math classes. And they'll have study groups, but none of the native English speakers can understand them during the study groups, and we just give up on them. I had those when I was in graduate school in a statistics lab. I just gave up. I just couldn't understand. And eventually the actual teacher of the course had to come and help us in our study group because we were all so frustrated because this guy just couldn't, we just couldn't understand a word he's saying. He knew his statistics very well, but we just couldn't we just couldn't handle it. And so you might do some intervention if it's really bad, but just some little slight corrections for a teenager. Like if we're talking about the 6th grade student, it's not that big of an issue. They're going to lose their accent. They're not going to keep it. Okay, going on. Sorry, I'm rambling on here. Okay, now, Anaisa, how long does it take for a newcomer CLD student to successfully learn all those rules of language? You never know all the rules of language. I don't know all the rules of language. You learn as many as you can, and the ones you need to be successful, and the other ones not so much. If I had more time, I could tell you a few things and show you just how little we know. And I'm still learning some things about English grammar types of things. So all the rules of language is going to be very difficult, especially the pragmatics for someone from another culture. But the grammar, the syntax, and so forth, even the morphology isn't always perfect. And a lot of that is school stuff at some point. There's the natural that we speak, and then there's the one that is considered academic language or standard English. Standard English and non-standard English. We want standard English in the schools. Non-standard English, that's the Ghana thing, the Gonna. And you might even write like that. That's non-standard, but no, we don't do that in standard English, especially not academic English. How do you correct a student when they made a mistake without hurting their feelings and shutting them down? You just say, now what did you say? Did you say such and such? And so repeat it back to them correctly is probably the best way to do it. They're going to catch on. 6th graders, they'll catch on eventually. And don't be as hard on them as I am on you guys. Okay. Elizabeth, what would happen if a student is stubborn and does not want to be proficient in a second language? That's going to be a problem. And there are kids who are brought here by their parents. They don't want to be here. They want to be back with their friends. You're going to have to be a friend to them the best you can. You're going to have to show sympathy, some empathy, feeling what they feel or understanding their feelings, and just do the best you can with them. And I wasn't successful with all of my students when I was teaching 5th grade. There were a couple of students I wasn't successful with, and I was very disappointed that I couldn't get to them. And I think there was more going on than just me. So do the best you can. Which language acquisition is usually harder for English language learners to catch on to? Now, I'm not sure which language acquisition you're talking about. English language learners, which part of it is more difficult? I would think just all the vocabulary, and it depends on the role they want to have. They can learn to speak. They can do the BICS. Everybody can learn the BICS, but learning the academic language to have to go on in college into a career like in law or TV or something like that, where you're talking to people in English language proficiency, then you have to work a little bit harder. It depends on the level they want to go to. And I think they're all hard. Um, the writing, they would probably say the writing is the hardest. Um, I find sometimes the reading is the hardest, especially if I look at a novel by a Latin American Nobel Prize winner for literature. You look at some of those guys that won Nobel Prizes for literature from Latin America. Try reading their stuff. I don't get it. I speak Spanish just fine. You certainly don't want me teaching this course in Spanish. I don't have the level of Spanish adequate to teach this course in Spanish, but I can talk to people. Okay. Ana. Okay, I guess that's the last one we have here. I hope I got everybody. Did I? Let's see how many I have here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, you guys are probably wondering, aren't you done yet? Why aren't you even done yet? Okay, when can comparing the cognitive linguistic knowledge of a student's native language, secondary language, make English language learning more frustrating for a student? When is it better just to teach with a clean slate? I don't think you want to do compare. I think you want to basically do with a clean slate. I gave you these examples and I asked you to, I can make the assumption, I think I can make the assumption that if you're in Laredo, you should have some knowledge of Spanish. Now, Spanish works, and if not, then you should be able to look it up on the internet and sort of figure it out. When I ask these questions, my assumption is that you're going to have kids from India, from Philippines, from Arabic countries, maybe from Syria, Afghanistan. You'll have kids from Africa, that French speaking Africa. You'll have Vietnamese students, Korean students, and you will have to do the clean slate. And fortunately, I didn't ask you those things about those languages, about pragmatics and things like that. That would be too much. But I just wanted to emphasize those. So I would say from everybody, it's the clean slate. Can a teacher assess a student's primary language proficiency when there is not a translator available to translate assessments in a non-standard Spanish foreign language? No, you can't. I don't know if the proficiency, you can basically look at the parents and just by knowing the level of their education and how the education system works in that country. If you see a Korean student who's been in school for the last 6 years, and they're probably going to be pretty high language proficiency to have advanced in school. And the first language, primary language proficiency, isn't near as important as how were they as students. If you could find out if they were good students, average students, what did they have the most trouble with? What were they the best at? What are their likes? What do they like to do? If they're going to be on a UIL team, like do they want to do spelling bee? Do they want to do math Olympics? Do they want to do speeches or one act play or whatever they do? Those are the things that are probably more important for a 6th grade student. When you're talking about the real little ones, that's hard to tell. But my assumption is that the language proficiency is always good in the first language. The difference is what level of education, how comfortable are they with the concepts of school talk. Like I talked about the different parts of a book, of a story, some of the concepts that you have that are universal in math. If they know math, they know the concepts, they just don't know the words. So, okay, I hope this is helpful for you, and I'll do one of these again next week, hopefully a lot sooner than what day is it today? I guess today is Monday. Okay, I've just been on the road and unpacking and everything. Don't even know what day it is. Okay, we'll talk to you later.